Okay, so we will continue with our discussion on chapter 7, which is on chemical reactions. Um, we're actually inching closer to the end of our semester kasi after this tatlong chapter na lang ang i-discuss natin, no? But after this chapter also, you will have your second preliminary examination, no? So good luck with that, no? Ah, yun, magte-take muna kayo ng quiz. Ang quiz for the chapter 7 is Lec and Lab combined. So basically 20 items lang yung sasagutan nyo for the quiz, no? Then, yun, second prelims, then we will proceed with the finals. So hopefully by first week of December, makapag-finals na tayo, no? Okay. So anyway, our goal for today is to discuss chemical reactions. Our expected outcomes are the following, no? So we should be able to distinguish the types of chemical reactions because there's lots of chemical reactions, no? One way to balance them very well is that you should be able to classify the type of chemical reaction that you have, no? Ma-categorize mo sila para mas madali ma-balance, no? And sometimes, kunwari, hindi given yung product, ikaw yung magpe-predict kung ano yung product. So, dito natin malalaman yan, no? Kasi there are some reactions na may products na mabubuo, meron ding wala, no? So, ngayon natin malalaman yan. Then another skill that you will have to learn ngayon is the balancing of the redox reaction. This is important as ginagamit to sa future chemistry ninyo and ginagamit din to sa daily life. For example, our batteries, they are powered by redox reactions, no? And our power grid as well, no? So anyway, so let's have a short review on the types of changes our matter can undergo. Our matter can undergo either physical or chemical change, no? So in change, what we have here is just the transformation of our matter from one state to another state. For example, the melting of ice into water, that is just a transition of solid water into liquid water. And if you add enough heat, magbo-boil off yan, kukulo yan, magiging gaseous yung ating water. So the chemical of your substance doesn't change, no? H2O pa rin yan regardless kung anong itsura niyan, anong state yan, no? Yun lang, nagbabago lang yung appearance niya. It has something to do with intermolecular forces din, no? Okay, so depending on the distance of the molecules, just like we discussed before, kapag magkakalayo yung ating matter, gases sila. Pag pinagdikit-dikit mo sila, magiging liquid sila or solid, no? So, this is something to do with just the intermolecular forces, no? Yan ating physical changes. However, when we discuss chemical changes or chemical reaction, what happens here is that your matter is fully transforming into another version. Nagbabagong anyo siya. For example, you have a paper. Pag sinunog mo yung paper na yan, it is no longer a paper after the reaction. It is being converted into char, yung kulay black, yung parang uling. Char tawag doon. May carbon dioxide din na mapo-form, may water vapor din na mapo-form, no? So basically, nagbabago yung identity ng ating substances, no? So hindi na siya yung old version niya. Another example would be our food that we consume. Kakatapos lang ng lunch break. So, kunwari, kumain ako ng food. Kumain na nga ako ng food, no? So, kunwari, kumain ka ng food. Yung food na yon, hindi na yon lalabas sa iyo as food itself, no? Yung tapsilog, hindi yan lalabas as tapsilog, no? It will be converted into another version, another form of substance, no? That is energy, na yun yung nagagamit natin in order to discuss lessons here. Yung ginagamit ko to to survive, yun yung energy na nakukuha ko from our food plus the waste products, no? Okay. So, yun lang. So, yun yung types ng changes at our matter can undergo. Okay. So, the general types of reaction can be classified. General to. So, we will not focus on this that much, no? Kasi general, pang-baby lang to. Okay. So, ito yung mga general types of chemical reaction. We have a synthesis, decomposition, single displacement, and double displacement, no? So, we classify them based on the patterns that they do. and just look at the equation, tas tignan mo kung ano yung nangyayari na. So for synthesis, what we have here is that we are just combining our substances, our reactants to form one products. No? Basically, yung two substances mo, they form one molecule. No? Pwedeng 3, pwedeng 4, pwedeng kahit ilan. No? Basta nagsasama-sama sila to form one entire new molecule. So that's a synthesis or a combination reaction. For a decomposition reaction naman, what happens here is that your substance is being converted into multiple products, no? So that is the polar opposite of your synthesis, no? Synthesis, marami kang reactant, then they form one product. Pag decomposition, you have one reactant and that is being converted into more products, no? So one example would be the electrolysis of water shown here. So um, if you pass through an electric if you pass your water through an electric current, pag kinuryente mo yung tubig mo, magbubula yan. So the bubbles that are formed are actually the hydrogen gas and the oxygen gases that are present in the water molecule. So that process is called electrolysis. No? So nagta-transform yung ating water, yung H2O, into hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. No? Purely different compound, no, from your water. Okay. Another version would be this one. This is potassium chlorate. If you ignite it, no, pag sinilaban mo yan sa apoy, it will transform into potassium chloride and oxygen gases. No? So mag-escape yung oxygen molecule from this molecule, kakawala siya, leaving off the potassium chloride behind. No? Tapos yung oxygen gas mag-evaporate or masusunog din sa atmosphere. Okay? So, yun lang ating decomposition reaction. Usually, our decomposition reaction occur when you have electricity applied to your system or you heat it. No? Pag ininit mo yung bagay, mag-evaporate yon. May kakawalang mga molecules doon. No? Okay? So, ganun. For single displacement reaction, what happens here is just by the pattern. Okay? So for single displacement, what happens here is that yung partner nilang original, they switches with another one. No? So nari AB plus C, forming AC plus B. So they just change the partners. Okay. For example, we have here silver nitrate plus zinc that produces zinc metal plus zinc nitrate. No? So basically, what happened here is that instead of silver being the partner of nitrate, pumapalit siya kay zinc. No? Bakit? Malalaman natin later. Okay. Another example would be here if you have magnesium metal reacted with acid, hydrochloric acid, that will produce hydrogen gas and magnesium chloride. No? So bubula tong system na to. Okay. Bakit mangyayari yan? Malalaman natin later. Okay. Another type. Okay. So the final type of the chemical reaction would be a double displacement reaction. No? So what happens here is that the ions of your substances, of your reactants, switches with the other. No? Nagpapalit-palit talaga sila ng mga ions natin. For example, AB plus CD, mag-switch yung A and B ng partners, forming AD and CB. No? So, ganun. Wherein A and C are your cations, B and D are your anions, respectively. Okay? So, ganun lang. Later, malalaman natin how will we predict the reactions. No? Anyway, so yun lang yung general reaction. No? So, we're done doing that since high school. Pero we will focus more on the advanced topics. No? Yung pang-college na. So, more specific types of reactions are the following. So, number one, we have combustion reaction, then followed by the reactions in aqueous solutions. Yun yung focus ng chapter natin talaga. No? Pinasadahan ko lang sa umpisa. So, ano ba meron sa combustion reaction? So, combustion reaction is just a reaction to which your substances, basically organic compounds, are being combusted or burned in air, in the presence of the atmosphere, sa hangin, to produce water vapor and carbon dioxide. No? And this is the pattern for the combustion reaction. As long as you see substances with CHO, minsan may O, minsan walang O. For example, ito, walang O. Hindi naman necessary yung O. No? Pero yun, basta may CHO ka na substance, pwedeng may O, pwedeng walang O, and it follows this pattern, that is a combustion reaction. No? So for example, C3H8 plus 5O2 forming 3CO2 and 4H2O. No? So what happens here is that this is your organic compound, itong C3H8, yun yung organic compound mo. This is the air or the oxygen in the air. No? So magsasama yan. So as you burn your organic compound, the oxygen in the air will oxidize your organic substance to form much simpler compounds such as carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so kapag sinunog mo yung papel, yan yung napoproduce, no? However, sometimes if we do not have enough oxygen in the air, no, especially in very constricted areas, mga area na wala masyadong oxygen, for example, yung uh, nagsindi ka ng kandila tapos tinakpan mo ng baso yon, okay, so kulang yung oxygen doon. So as a result, no, since onti yung oxygen in those conditions, ang mangyayari is that the combustion will not proceed completely. Kasi kapag yung reaction natin ay complete, kunwari sinunog mo yung papel, tas there's enough oxygen around, wala dapat na matitira doon. Pero kunwari may natirang kulay itim, no? Ibig sabihin nun, the reaction is not really complete, no? So, ano uli yung idea? Ideally, kapag sinunog mo yung papel, dapat walang matitira. May yung carbon dioxide and water talaga yon, lahat yon. Okay? However, if the reaction is not complete, ibig sabihin, hindi enough yung ventilation sa paligid, no? Or wala masyadong oxygen talaga, then we will have incomplete combustion products. No? What are the incomplete combustion products? That's soot. Yun yung kulay itim. Okay? Pwede rin carbon monoxide, no? Yun. Instead of carbon dioxide, pwede ka makabuo ng soot and carbon monoxide. Or pwedeng combination of all those stuff. Pwede may soot, pwede may carbon monoxide, pwedeng may carbon dioxide din. No? So, ganun yung nangyayari. Okay? So, kailan uli na-produce ang soot and yung carbon monoxide? That is produced when you have an incomplete combustion. Okay? So, pag pinagsama-sama mo yan, tapos kinulang ka ng oxygen, may mapo-form na soot or carbon monoxide. Itong soot na to, ito yung nakikita natin na kulay itim, no? So, wala rin, nagsunog ka ng papel, tapos may itim doon na natira-tira. Soot yon. Another example would be yun sa ating kusina, no? So, kunwari, pag nagluluto kayo ng kusina, anong papansin nyo sa ilalim ng lutuan? 'Di ba minsan nangingitim? Nangingitim 'yon because yun yung incomplete combustion product, no? Yung ating LPG, yung gas doon ay butane. Okay? So, yung butane na yon, if that is not completely burned off into carbon dioxide, may madedeposit na itim-itim sa ilalim ng kitchenware mo. Okay? Ganun lang. Yung carbon monoxide naman, ito naman yung isa sa mga iniiwasan sa cars. Sakyan kayo. Mapapansin nyo, kunwari kung wala kayong sasakyan, yung tatay niyo may sasakyan or yung nanay niyo may sasakyan, tanungin nyo ano yung catalytic converter. No? So the purpose of that catalytic converter sa ilalim ng sasakyan, bandang exhaust tube yun or tambucho. Ang purpose nun is just to convert the carbon monoxides into carbon dioxide. No? Kasi yung carbon monoxide, that is very toxic. No? You inhale just a few amounts of that, may hilo ka na. No? Magdagdag ka ba ng carbon monoxide, pwede ka mamatay. No? And that was actually used by the Nazis, no, to kill people before, no. So ganun yung ginagawa nila dati. So meron silang mobile na nagpo-produce ng carbon monoxide yung sasakyan, then yun, ginagamit nila for extermination kasi deadly talaga yung carbon monoxide, no. Kaya mapapansin nyo rin, 'di ba, sa mga movie, may apoy-apoy, 'di ba? Parang nanghihina sila, no. yun kasi yung isang product, ay yun kasi yung isang manifestation na baka you are being poisoned by carbon monoxide, no? Nahihilo ka, you get dizzy, then magko-collapse ka na lang, then eventually you will die, no? So ganun ka-toxic to. That's why our cars, no, they are equipped with catalytic converters, no? Okay? So yun lang, share ko lang. And next one, we will have our reactions in aqueous solutions, no? So ano yung aqueous solution? Ano yung aqueous? Ano yung liquid? No? Magkaiba ba sila? Okay, so ganito lang. When we say liquid, that is actually the, ano, ibig sabihin ng liquid, yung ating substance ay iisa siya in the liquid state. No? Kunwari water. So that means yung water natin, lahat yon ay H2O molecules lang yun nandun. Nothing else, no? So kapag puro H2O molecules lang yun nandun and that is in liquid state, then that's a liquid, no? That is a medium to which your substance can be dissolved into. Ano yung difference niyan sa aqueous? Sa aqueous, ganito. May ions ka or may substances ka na nakahalo sa tubig. Okay? So yung liquid, ito yung magdi-dissolve. Yung aqueous, ito yung substance na nilagay mo sa liquid. Okay? So ibig sabihin, kapag aqueous yan, hindi lang water yung nandyan, kundi meron kang molecules, meron kang ions dissolved in it. No? Pero kapag walang ions or molecules dissolved in it, ibig sabihin nun yun ay liquid lang. Okay? So yun yung difference. Kapag aqueous, may hinalo sa tubig. Let's say ganun, no? So may hinalo sa tubig kunwari, no? Pag liquid yan, ibig sabihin pure yung molecules na naka-liquid state. Okay? Regardless kung water yan, carbon disulfide, etc. Okay? So yun lang yung difference nila. And what happens here kapag kunwari, you have asin. May asin ka, nilagay mo sa tubig. Ano nangyayari? Biglang disappear, di ba? Okay, so the reason why it eventually disappears is that it undergoes the process called ionization or dissociation process. What happens there is that your ionic compounds, for example, yung asin, ito yung bloke ng asin for example, pag nilagay mo yan sa tubig, what happens is that your ions become separated. Naghihiwalay-hiwalay yung ions until the point na hindi mo na sila makita because ions are very, very tiny to be observed, no? So, kaya parang nagdi-disappear sila. That is also true for um, other ionic compounds. For example, baking soda. Kunwari, lagyan mo yung baking soda sa lagay mo yung baking soda sa tubig. Eventually, pag minix out mo yan, pag in-stir mo yan, mawawala din, di ba? Okay? So, what happens there is that your ions are being separated into different cations and anions. Naghihiwalay sila. Okay? So, ganito yung nangyayari. This is your ionic compound. Upon contact with water, what happens is that the water molecules will trap your ions. I-cage nila yung ions mo. So, yun, itong sodium, okay, so itong sodium, babalibutan ng water molecules in which the oxygen part is pointed into it, no? Ano yung reason? Ion dipole interaction. This is ion, the water is dipole. So they will try to maximize the possible intermolecular force para humalo yan. Okay? So yung negative end ng oxygen kakabit kay sodium. Okay? So yan, mawawala lahat ng sodium sa iyong structure. Ganon din naman sa Cl, no? So this is your water which is which is dipole as we know. Yung Hi positive end, no? Because this is less electronegative than the oxygen. Okay, so this is partial positive. The partial positive end of your water molecule will be pointed to Cl. Mapopoint siya towards Cl. Okay, so ganun yung nangyayari when you place your ionic compounds in water. So what happens is that the water molecules will trap your ions, no? Papalibutan nila yung ions mo. That makes it disappear. Parang nawawala sila, di ba? Okay, so ganun yung nangyayari. So, ganun ha. So, anong takeaway natin dito? Kailangan alam natin that our ionic compounds will dissociate eventually into ions. No? So, let's have some practice about that. No? Kasi medyo important to later. Alright, we have this one. We show the ito. Ay. So we show the dissociation or the ionization process for the following compounds. So you have the following ionic compounds. We are going to dissociate them into ions. So let's try. So for example, nitric acid. Nitric acid is an acid that is an ionic compound. Okay. So what happens if you place that in water? Okay, so what happens if you place that in water is that your cation and your anion will separate. No? So ano yung cation sa HNO3? That's H plus, your hydronium ion, and your nitrate ion. Okay, so you should be able to recall the names of your ions and their corresponding charges. No? So important yon kasi kapag nakalimutan nyo, baka madali kayo sa later topics natin. Okay? So, yan yung ating ionization process for nitric acid. Your nitric acid will eventually separate into hydronium ion, H+, and nitrate ions. Keep in mind their charges. Next one, we have aluminum chloride. If we place that in water, what happens is that they will be separated into what? No? So that's aluminum chloride. Our cation is aluminum ion, which is 3 plus in charge, and chloride ion, which is negative in charge. No? However, as you can see, yung ating aluminum ion, 3 plus yung charge niyan. Yes, no? That's by default. Ilang aluminum atom meron tayo dito? Isa lang. So, ibig sabihin, we just have one aluminum 3 plus ion that can be obtained from this molecule. Paano naman ito? Cl3. The charge of Cl is negative, no? Pero, we have 3 Cls. May tatlong Cl daw tayo according to the formula. So, that means we have to place a coefficient 3 for the Cl. Parang ibabalance mo rin siya. Okay, so ganun. So, ganun. Ibabalance mo yun, ha? Kukunin mo yung ions na pwede mo ma-obtain dito. Then, you balance the number of atoms, no? Or the number of polyatomic ions. Kaya bahala, no? So, I only have 1 Al. So, isa lang yon. I have 3 Cls here. So, 3 Cl minus ang mapoproduce ko. Okay? So, let's try this. This is barium oxalate. Okay, so this is barium oxalate. Okay, so ano yung ions na mapoproduce mo dyan? Edi barium 2 plus and your oxalate ion. Okay, so the oxalate ion has a charge of negative 2. If you're not familiar, you can look up sa ating table ng ions. Just I presented you last time na. Okay, so ganun. So how many barium atoms I have here? Just one. How many oxalate polyatomic ion do I have here? Isa lang din. Okay, so that's already balanced. So let's have chromium chloride, chromium 3 chloride. Okay. So anong ions mapoproduce natin dyan? Obviously, that's chromium 3 plus ion and your 3 chloride anions. Now, so basically, what we're doing here is just the reverse crisscross. Ano? So, ganun. I-reverse mo lang yung crisscross. Itong 3, saan galing yan? Kay CR. So, 3 plus. Itong 1, saan galing yan? Kay Cl minus. Okay? However, may tatlo kang Cl, so you have to balance it. Next one, we have calcium sulfate. Okay, so when you ionize your calcium sulfate, what are the ions that can be produced? Of course, that's calcium 2 plus and sulfate ion, SO4 negative 2. Okay? Again, keep in mind the charges. No? O, pwede kayong mag-pick sa inyong mga charges, sa inyong table ng ions. Dami pa ba ito? Okay, sodium bromide, NaBr. When you place it in water, what are the ions that can be produced? They, of course, sodium ion and bromide ion. Silver nitrate. what are the ions that can be produced? The silver plus ion and nitrate ion. Okay, so that's basically it, no? So, kayo na lang bahala sa natira. So, ganun yung nangyayari po when we have ionization reaction. So, basically, your cations and your anions separates, no? However, you have to keep in mind kung gaano karaming ions yung mapoproduce mo. Okay, so for example, I have 3 CLs here, so I have to balance that 3 CL lalagay ko doon. So, that's important. Okay, so let's go back. So, yan. So, when we mix our if we mix our substances in water, kapag gumagawa tayo ng aqueous solutions and pinaghaluhan mo natin sila, some reactions may or may not take place, no? For example, yung tubig, pati, I mean, yung suka, pati asin, paghaluin mo, may nangyayari ba? Wala, no? Pero masarap siya ang condiment. Favorite ko yun eh. Lalo na pag prito, di ba? Okay? Pero kunwari, suka, pati baking soda, pinaghalo mo. Ano mangyayari? Bubula yun. Na? So, mamaya may video akong papanood about that. No? So, ano mangyayari doon? Ibig sabihin, sometimes, pag pinaghalo mo yung substances mo, they may not form reactions. Sometimes, they can. Yun yung tanong, no? Paano natin malalaman kung magkakaroon tayo ng chemical reactions or wala? Kasi starting this point, hindi na natin alam yung products. Tayo yung magde-determine ng products. Okay? So for us to be able to determine the products that can be formed, the following has to be considered. No? So ito yung ating mga criteria in predicting the products of our chemical reactions. Number one, there are ions that can combine to form insoluble substances. No? Kapag our ions nag-combine sila to form insoluble substances, then we have a precipitation reaction. Kapag yung ions naman natin, they can neutralize each other forming neutral substances, then that's acid-base reaction. Kapag ating ions naman, they were able to transfer electrons from one species to another, then that's called the redox reaction. Okay? So basically, pwede natin ma-predict yung products natin as long as, if they can form insoluble products, or they can neutralize, or they can transfer electrons. So yun yung aaralin natin ngayon. Okay? So, important yung pag-alam ng dissociation process dito. Kasi as long as hindi nyo kaya i-dissociate ang inyong ions, mahirapan kayo. So, yung gagawin natin. Okay? So, okay, let's continue. So, for precipitation reaction, what happens here is that kapag pinaghalo mo yung dalawang substances, magpo-form ka ng insoluble product. Na. So, yung insoluble products na yon, mamumuo yun pag pinaghalo mo ang iyong substances. No? So, this is one example. For example, ito. You have your magnesium sulfate. Transparent yan. Okay? Pero, pag pinaghalo mo yung dalawang yan, what happened? Naging cloudy. Okay? Sabi dito sa sinulat kong reaction, sabi niya sa sinulat kong reaction, ayan ay, ito daw yung nangyari. Naging double displacement, no? Si magnesium nakipartner na kay hydroxide, si sodium nakipartner kay sulfate. Ang tanong, paano na ganyan nga yan, no? So, magbigay pa ako ng isa pang example ng precipitation reaction. Hanapin ko yung mga videos. Meron dito. Ito, video ko. A combustion reaction. Yeah. Tignan nyo nangyari. Originally, silang dalawa ay clear. transparent yung ating solution. Pero nung pinaghalo natin sila, what happened is that clear yan. So, tawag natin just they are the and eventually, yung namuo na yun, teka lang. Ayan. Okay. So, etong pinaghalo natin kanina, 'di ba, namuo lahat, no? So, eventually, yung ating white particles dun, yung mga solid particles dun, magse-settle down yon. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, pwede mo makuha itong white chunk na yan. Ang tawag natin sa white chunk na yan, not necessarily white yan, no? Pwedeng yellow, pwedeng ibang colors, no? Okay. So, ang tawag natin dun sa mga namumuo na yon, they are called precipitates, no? They will not be dissolved in water. Hindi sila maghahalo sa tubig, no? So, ibig sabihin, mamumuo talaga yan. So, you can filter that. Pwede mo kunin yan, no? Okay? So, hindi ko lang ginawa, no? Okay? So, yun lang. So, ano nangyari doon? So, pinaghalo natin dalawang clear substances. When upon mixing them, may namuo, no? We call those substances the precipitates. Sila yung mga namumuo. Then, we can eventually get them out of the solution by just filtering them. Okay? Ito yung tanong. Kunwari, binigyan ko lang kayo na ito. Binigyan ko lang kayo niyan. Kaya niya ba ma-predict kung ano yung ma-perform niya? Kayang-kaya, no? So, how will we be able to predict the products of our precipitation reaction? In predicting the products of your precipitation reaction, you should be able to at least memorize the solubility rules. No? The solubility rules will be our guide in determining to which ions, kung anong ions yung mga pag pinagsama ay mamumuo na. Kapag namuo sila, then the precipitation reaction will proceed, no? Mangyayari yung precipitation reaction. However, pag hindi sila namuo, ibig sabihin nun, walang reaction na mangyayari. Pag walang precipitate na mabubuo, walang reaction. Pag meron, may reaction. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, not all aqueous solutions, pag pinaghalo mo, ay may product sila, no? Hindi parate, no? Okay? So, yan. So, ito lang yung ating solubility rules. So, gusto ko basahin nyo na lang yan. Screenshot nyo na lang yan. Screenshot ko na para sa inyo. Okay, so send ko na lang dito sa GC natin yung ating solubility rules. Okay, so kailangan natin yan i-memorize, no? Pero sa case nyo ngayon, kahit di nyo na i-memorize, sa bahay naman kayo nagtetest eh. Okay, so it tells us kung anong substances yung pag pinaghalo mo makaka-form ng precipitate, and if the precipitate can be formed, then the reaction will happen. Kapag walang precipitate na mabubuo, walang reaction na mangyayari. So let's check here. So ito yung mga usually soluble substances natin. So, usually soluble ions. For example, lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, and ammonium. Sabi niyan, they are always soluble. So wala silang precipitate na mabubuo. Nitrates, they're also soluble regardless kung sino partner nilang cation. Ito naman, chlorides, bromides, iodides. They are soluble except for the precipitates AgCl, Hg2Cl2, PbCl2, AgBr, Hg2Br2, etc. No? So, ibig sabihin, kapag iba yung partner nila, other than mercury, other than silver, and other than lead, kapag hindi yan yung mga partner nila, soluble sila. Pero kapag ito yung partner nila, silver, mercury 1, and lead, sila ay precipitate. Okay? Ibig sabihin, the reaction will proceed. Pag hindi yan yung partners, walang mabubuo. Sulfates, ito naman sabi diyan, they are usually soluble except when paired with calcium, strontium, barium, and lead. No? So, ibig sabihin, kunwari, sodium sulfate, hindi yan precipitate. No? Pero ang calcium sulfate, yan ay precipitate. Sabi kasi dito, no? So, soluble sila, maliban na lang kung ang partner nila ay calcium, strontium, barium, and lead. The next one will be acetates. All acetates are soluble. Ito yung nasa suka. Sodium acetic acid. No? Next one, we have usually insoluble. So phosphates, they are generally insoluble unless paired with ammonium and group 1 metals. No? Ibig sabihin, kapag si phosphates, pinair mo siya with calcium, precipitate yon. Kailan siya hindi magiging precipitate? Kailan ang phosphate hindi magiging precipitate? When it is paired with group 1 metals or ammonium ion. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind. Ganun yung pag-interpret na to. Let's have carbonates. Sabi niyan, carbonates are generally insoluble. So, hindi talaga sila nahalo. Maliban na lang kung ang partner nila ay ammonium ion and group 1 metals ulit. Okay? Hydroxides. They are generally insoluble unless they are paired with ammonium, group 1 metals, strontium, barium, and calcium ions. No? So other than that, they are insoluble. Then sulfides. Sulfides are generally insoluble unless paired with ammonium and group 1 metals and group 2 cations. No? Magnesium, calcium, and barium are slightly soluble. Okay? So, ganun lang. Kailangan alam nyo kung siya ay mag-form ng precipitate or not. No? So, paano natin gagawin yung reaction na binigay natin kanina? Gagawa ako ng blank paper para mas madali. Magnesium sulfate pati sodium hydroxide. Dito tayo sa OneNote natin. Ito ha, ayan. Andyan yung solubility rules na. Gawin natin yung example natin na yan. Magnesium. Kunwari, hindi natin alam yung mangyayari. Tapos kailangan natin malaman. Siyempre, wala naman tayong gamit sa bahay to do the reaction. Wala kayong magnesium sulfate, wala kayong sodium hydroxide, no? So, kailangan ma-predict natin yung products ng reaction even without doing the experiment, no? So, how are we going to do that? Hindi mag-solubility rules lang tayo. Ano ba muna mangyayari? Ganito po mangyayari. The first process, bago magkaroon ka ng reaction, is that your cations and your anions from your ionic compounds, they will separate. Magsa-separate yan. So, ito yung unang step na mangyayari. Yung magnesium sulfate nyo at yung sodium hydroxide, maghihiwalay sila into ions. Ano yung ions na mabubuo natin sa magnesium sulfate? Yan ay magnesium 2+ and sulfate ions. Keep in mind yung charge. Okay? Then, ano yung mabubuo na ions sa sodium hydroxide and the Na+ and your hydroxide anions. Okay? So, ganun yung nangyari. Itong magnesium sulfate, nung nilagay ko sa tubig, naging ions. Itong sodium hydroxide, nung nilagay ko sa tubig, naging ions din. Tapos, ano ginawa doon? Pinaghalo sila. Ibig sabihin, itong mga ions natin, pagsasama-samahin natin. Okay? Pagsasama-samahin natin silang lahat. No? So, let's do that. Okay, so nung pinaghalo yung dalawang beakers containing magnesium sulfate and sodium hydroxide, what happened is that yung ions natin pinagsama-sama natin. Okay? So, ngayon, from our present ions, mamimili tayo ng pair na mag-form ng precipitate. Paano tayo mamimili ng pair? Ganito. Usually, magse-separate sila, di ba? So, ibig sabihin, try mo i-pair yung magkabilaang cations and anions. Okay? Kasi alam mo na, maghihiwalay ito eh, di ba? So, try mo i-pair yung magkabilaan. Okay? Try natin i-pair yung magnesium and yung sulfate. I mean yung hydroxide. Pagparesin natin sila. Tapos pag-pair natin yung sodium pati yung sulfate na. Tignan natin kung sila ay makakagawa ng precipitate na. Paano natin malalaman kung makakagawa sila ng precipitate? Tingin tayo sa solubility rules. Okay? Ano yung unang pair natin? Magnesium pati hydroxide. Okay? So, tignan natin kung ano sabi dito sa rules about magnesium and hydroxide. Ito, basahin natin. Saan yung magnesium? Saan yung hydroxide? Ito, hydroxide nakalagay. Ang sabi dyan, insoluble compound ang hydroxide. Tingin ka dito sa kabilang column. Soluble exception. Ano ibig sabihin nun? So, insoluble yung hydroxides generally unless, kaya siya magiging soluble kapag pinair siya with alkali metal ion and barium 2+. No? Okay, so ibig sabihin kapag yung iyong hydroxide pinair mo with group 1 metals and barium ion, dun lang siya magiging soluble. Otherwise, siya ay magiging precipitate, no? So, tignan natin. Saan natin pinair yung Mg, yung OH natin? Kay magnesium. Question, is magnesium group 1 metal? Hindi. Ano ba yung mga group 1 metal? Lithium, potassium, sodium, etc. No? So, hindi siya group 1 metal. Ang magnesium ba ay barium? Yun lang kasi option natin eh. Hindi rin siya barium. Siyempre, magnesium yan. So, ano ibig sabihin nun? That magnesium and hydroxide can form insoluble compounds. No? So, pwede sila maghalo to form precipitate. No? Kasi hindi to group 1 metal. Hindi rin to barium ion. So, ibig sabihin, insoluble talaga yan. No? So, ano yung masasabi natin? We can form precipitate na. Precipitate can be formed. Ngayon, ang question, ano yung formula ng precipitate na magagawa mo? Ano yung kanyang chemical formula na magagawa mo out of Mg and OH? No? So, basically, gagawin mo lang yung crisscross. So, Mg2+, OH-, polyatomic ion yan. Lagyan ng parenthesis. Yung 2, ilalagay sa baba. Yung 1, ilalagay doon sa baba niya. So, ano yung formula ng ating precipitate? Mg, OH2. So, ito yung precipitate natin. Pag yan ay precipitate, lalagyan mo ng solid. No? Namumuo kasi yun eh. So, kailangan nakalagay solid. So, this is our precipitate. So, ibig sabihin, the reaction can proceed. Basta may isang precipitate na kayang mabuo, mangyayari yung reaction. Kailan walang reaction? Kapag walang precipitate na buo. Okay? So, let's try sodium and sulfate. Kung sila ay precipitate or hindi. No? Tingnan natin. Ito, sabi dito, sulfates. Sulfates are soluble. Nakalagay doon. Soluble compound, sulfate. Insoluble exception. Ibig sabihin nun, kailan siya magiging insoluble? Sulfates of silver, calcium, strontium, barium, mercury 1, and lead 2. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, if your sulfate is paired with these ions, ibig sabihin siya ay precipitate. Kapag hindi siya paired dyan, siya ay hindi precipitate. No? Okay? Pag dito pinair, precipitate. Pag hindi dyan, hindi precipitate. Tignan natin, yung sodium. Andito ba siya sa insoluble exception? Wala. Hindi naman to sodium, hindi rin to sodium, hindi rin ito sodium. Ito rin, hindi sodium. Ito, hindi rin. Hindi rin ito sodium. So, ibig sabihin, sodium and sulfate will form soluble compound. So, ano masasabi natin doon? No precipitate. can be formed. Okay, so wala tayong precipitate na mabubuo dyan. Only magnesium hydroxide is the precipitate that we can form out of the reaction. Okay, so question, may reaction ba? Yes, no. Kailan natin masasabing walang reaction? Kapag walang precipitate na nabuo, walang reaction. Pero kapag may kahit isang precipitate na mabuo, ibig sabihin may chemical reaction. Okay? So, eventually, alamin natin yung ion na kaya, alamin natin yung compound na kaya na mabuo natin dito. Okay? So, sodium sulfate. So, no precipitate can be formed. Ibig sabihin, pwede natin pagsamahin pa rin yan, pero hindi natin lalagyan ng S. Ha? Kasi ang S, specific yan for precipitates. No? Kapag walang S, ibig sabihin hindi siya precipitate. Okay? So, anong compound yung mabubuo natin out of sodium and sulfate? Criss-cross. Yung 2 mapupunta dito. Yung 1 mapupunta doon. So, that is NaSO4. Na2SO4. Okay? So, yan yung ating mga compounds na mabubuo. Out of the 2 compounds that are formed, only MgOH2 is the precipitate. Okay? So, finally, we can say that MgSO4 plus NaOH can produce sodium sulfate and magnesium hydroxide. Then, eventually, ibabalance mo rin yan. Okay? Ilang magnesium meron? Tig-isa. Ilang sulfate meron? Isa din. Ilang sodium? May dalawa doon. Ilang hydroxide? May dalawa doon. So, basically, times 2 ang sodium hydroxide. Ganun ha, ibabalance mo pa rin yan. Inalam mo lang yung formulas na kaya mo mabuo out of the ions. Tapos, ano sabi natin? Sino yung precipitate dyan? Yung magnesium hydroxide. Na? So, lalagyan mo yan ng S, indicating na siya ay precipitate. So, the reaction will happen. Kailan uli mangyayari yung reaction? Kapag may isa, kahit isang precipitate na nagawa na mangyayari yung reaction. Pag wala talagang mabuo na precipitate, no reaction. Okay? So, ang tawag natin sa equation na to, we call this the molecular equation. Ano meron sa molecular equation? We showed the complete representation of the molecules that we can create out of our ions. No? So, ibig sabihin yan, yung mga ions, pinagsama-sama lahat. No? So, this is the molecular equation. Ang isang type pa ng equation ay tinatawag nating ionic equation. So, ano yung meron sa ionic equation naman? Basically, ang iyong ionic compounds, yung ionic compounds na soluble, yung hindi precipitate, gagawin mo silang ions, no? So, for example, yung magnesium sulfate, anong ions magagawa mo dyan? Mg2+, SO4 negative 2. Okay? So, yan yung ionic, yan yung mga ions na kaya natin magawa out of MgSO4. Sa sodium hydroxide, ano yung ions na kaya natin magawa dyan? Na+, pati OH-. Pero may coefficient kang 2. So, yung coefficient na 2, out of your molecular equation, ilalagay mo rin sa sodium and sa hydroxide. Important yon. Okay? Then, ano yung products natin? Sodium sulfate, yan ay soluble compound, di ba? So, i-separate mo yan into ions. May dalawang Na+ na mabubuo dyan. SO4 negative 2 ion. Yung precipitate, hindi mo yung gagawing ions. Kasi sabi nga natin, ang precipitate, hindi siya soluble. So, hindi mo siya paghihiwalayan. Okay? Papakita mo pa rin yung S kasi hindi siya maghihiwalay. Only yung substances na kaya maghiwalay, yan yung paghihiwalayin mo. Don't forget the coefficients. Okay? So, may 2 doon sa sodium hydroxide. So, 2 sodium, 2 hydroxide. May 2 yung sodium dito. So, 2 Na+. Okay? So that's our ionic equation. Pag sinabi naman nating net ionic equation, ano meron sa net ionic equation? Copy-paste ko lang to. Okay? Wait lang, copy-paste ko lang. Okay, so what happens in your net ionic equation is that from your ionic equation, mula dito sa equation na to, ika-cancel mo yung similar terms na ions. Again, yung ions yung ika-cancel. Yung similar lang. Kung ano yung present sa reactant, tapos ano yung present sa product side, sila yung ika-cancel mo. Yung ions, ha? So, anong ions yung present dito sa reactant and the product side? So, yun ay yung sodium ion. May dalawang sodium ion dyan. So, cancel. Meron din dito. Cancelled sila. Ano pa yung parehas sa reactant at sa product side? Yung sulfate. No? May sulfate ion ka. May sulfate ion ka rin doon. Okay? Yung hindi precipitate, yung hindi ion, I mean yung precipitate or yung hindi ion, hindi mo sila ika-cancel. Ang ika-cancel mo lang ay yung ions na parehas on the reactant and on the product side, such as yung sodium, meron sa reactant, meron din sa product. Sa sulfate, meron din sa reactant, meron din sa product. So, yun yung ka-cancel mo. Tapos yung natira, yun yung net ionic equation natin. So, ano yung net ionic equation? Mg2 plus 2AOH minus producing MgOH2. Okay? So, pakita mo pa rin na solid siya. Okay, so we can represent the precipitation reaction with three equations. Molecular equation, this tells us about the ionic compounds that can be formed. Lahat naka-ionic compound, walang ions. Naka-ionic compound lahat, no? Ang ionic equation naman, yung ating mga ionic compounds naka-ions maliban sa precipitate. And so lahat yan naka-ions except the precipitate. Okay? Sa net ionic equation, ang ginagawa mo lang is from your ionic equation, ika-cancel out mo lang yung similar term. Kaya nga sinabing net. Diba? Pag net sa business, kina-cancel mo yung capital mo out of your profit to get the net income. Okay, so gano'n yung ginagawa dito. Ika-cancel mo yung parehas na ions. Okay, so you will have this one. So let's practice some more. Practice pa tayo. Oh, marami dito. Kayo na bahala sa iba. Let's try this. Predict if there is a precipitate when the following pairs are mixed in a solution. By the way, nakalimutan pala ako. Di ba mababansin nyo sa net ionic equation, may mga kinancel tayo. Ang tawag doon sa mga kinancel mo ay spectator ions. O yun yung tawag sa kanila, spectator ions. Ibig sabihin nun, nasa paligid lang sila, but they do not participate in the reaction. They do not form the precipitate. Okay? So, yun yung tawag sa kanila, yung mga kinancel natin. Oopsie. Ngayon, try natin to. Predict if there is a precipitate that can be formed when the following pairs are mixed in a solution. Copper 2 nitrate and ammonium sulfate. Tignan natin kung may precipitate. Anong ginagawa dito? Yung iyong reactants gagawing ions, no? Gagawin nating ions yan. So, ano yung mabubuo natin na ions sa copper 2 nitrate? Edi Cu2 plus, pati dalawang nitrate ions. Okay? Okay, ammonium sulfate naman. Nakagawa tayo ng dalawang ammonium ion and isang sulfate anion. Tapos ano gagawin natin? Ipag-prepare natin yung magkabilaang cation and yung anion. Then let's check kung sila ay precipitate. Tignan natin kung precipitate sila ha. Check natin yung ammonium nitrate kung yan ay precipitate. Basta tayo dito. Sabi dito, nitrate. Nitrate, saan siya nakalagay? Soluble. Insoluble ba siya? Wala nakalagay doon. Pag wala nakalagay, ibig sabihin, soluble talaga yon. Okay? So, wala tayong precipitate na mabubuo doon. So, that means, ammonium nitrate ay, no precipitate tayo dito. Not a precipitate. Yung partner na yon hindi yung precipitate. Okay? So, let's try copper sulfate, copper 2 sulfate. Kung yan ay precipitate or hindi. Sulfate. Sabi diyan, sulfates are soluble. Kailan siya insoluble? Kapag partner niya si silver, calcium, strontium, barium, mercury 1, and lead. Ano yung partner niya sa ating problem? Copper. Wala dyan si copper. So, ibig sabihin, soluble yung ating sulfate doon. So, it tells us na hindi rin siya precipitate. Ano conclusion natin? Kapag parehas not precipitate, pag walang precipitate na buo, ibig sabihin nun, no reaction. Okay? So, we can rewrite our problem as Cu, copper nitrate, copper 2 nitrate, plus ammonium sulfate, no reaction. Okay? Bakit no reaction? Kasi wala tayong precipitate na nabuo. No? Kailangan at least isa. Okay? So, no precipitate, edi no reaction. Practice pa tayo. Iron 3 chloride and nitrate. Okay. Anong unang gagawin? Gawin silang ions, na? Ano ions magagawa natin out of FeCl3, Fe3+, and tatlong Cl-. Ano pa? Silver plus and NO3-. So, anong gagawin? Pagpalitin ng partner. Tignan kung may precipitate na mabubuo. Okay? So, ito yung unang partner natin. Ayan. Fe3+ and NO3-. Tignan natin kung may precipitate na mabubuo, no? NO3, ito, nitrate. Ang sabi dyan, nitrate ay soluble. Kailan siya insoluble? Walang nakalagay. So, ibig sabihin nun, soluble talaga yung nitrate, kahit anong partner yan. Not precipitate, no? Wala tayong precipitate na mabubuo dito. How about silver and Cl-? Yung ion lang ha. Yung coefficient, set aside mo lang. Okay? Set aside mo lang yan. Ions lang gusto natin. May mabubuo kaya dyan? Cl, halide. So, halides are soluble. Okay? Kailan siya insoluble? Kapag partner niya si silver, mercury 1, lead. Ano yung kapartner ng chloride natin? Silver. Ibig sabihin, precipitate yon. Okay? So, we can form precipitate. Ano yung formula ng precipitate natin? Criss-cross lang. AgCl. Okay? So, tig-isa sila ng charge. So, pag criss-cross mo yun din. Tig-isa lang din sila. So, that means, we can say na a reaction will occur. Reaction will occur, no? Tapos, ang formula niya ay ganito. FeCl3 plus AgNO3. Ano yung precipitate? AgCl. Lagyan mo ng solid. Okay? So, precipitate yan. Tapos itong ating hindi precipitate, paghaluin mo pa rin. No? Pag criss-crossin mo pa rin. So, that would be FeNO3. 3. Okay? Yun, pinag-criss-cross ko na yan. Then, yung precipitate, lalagyan mo ng S. That means yung iba ay hindi precipitate na. So, this will be our molecular equation. Okay, so yung ating molecular equation. Lahat ginawang molecular formula. Okay? Yung precipitate, lalagyan mo ng S. Okay? Ano yung ating ionic equation? Yung ating ionic equation would be yung ating mga molecular formulas na hindi naka-S, yung walang S, gagawin mong ions yan uli. No? Gawin mong ions uli. Ay, teka lang, bago mo gawin yan, i-balance mo pala muna to. Let's balance the molecular equation first. Isang Fe, tatlong Cl, isa lang doon. So, tatlo. Okay. Tatlong Ag, lagyan mo ng 3. And tatlong NO3, tatlong NO3. Balance na. So, balance mo muna itong molecular equation mo bago ka mag-proceed with net ionic equation. With your ionic equation. Ano gagawin sa ionic equation? Lahat, maliban sa may S, ay gagawing ions. Okay? So, FeCl3. So, Fe3 plus. 3Cl minus. Okay. Silver nitrate. 3Ag plus. NO3. Tatlong NO3 minus. Saan yung mga mabubuo dyan? O yung AgCl, hindi natin yan gagawing ionic ions, no? Kasi may S. Basta may S, hindi gagawing ions. Plus FeNO3 o Fe3 plus. Plus tatlong NO3. Okay? So, yan. Ginawa na nating ions lahat maliban sa precipitate. Always ganon. Yung mga precipitate, hindi mo sila gagawing ions. Precipitate nga sila eh. Okay? Tapos ano na? Net ionic equation. So the next one would be net ionic equation. Ang gagawin natin dito, yung ions na similar dito, ika-cancel natin. Kung nag-appear sila on the same, kung pareha sila nag-appear on the reactant and the product side, cancel natin yon. So ano yung nag-appear on the left and the right side? Yung Fe3 plus, ito, cancel natin yan. Ano pa? NO3. Wala na. Okay, so yun lang yung ating mga spectator ions. Okay, so yung tawag uli sa kanila ay spectator ions. Okay, so ka-cancel mo sila. So eventually, our net ionic equation would be 3Ag plus 3Cl minus forming 3AgClS. Since pare-parehas yung kanilang coefficient, i-cancel mo na lang din. Okay? Ag plus Cl minus AgCl. Or, ayan. Okay, so ganun yung ating progression. No? So una, yung iyong ions, split mo sila. Pag may precipitate kang nabuo, gawin mo yung molecular equation. Pagsamahin mo itong precipitate, pati yung hindi precipitate, pagsamahin mo pa rin. So, i-balance mo yan. Then, eventually, gagawin mo yung ionic equation. Ang ginagawa sa ionic equation ay lahat ginagawang ions except for the precipitate. Yan, hindi natin ginalaw yung AgCl. Yung iba ginawa nating ions. Then for the net ionic equation, yung ating spectator ions, yun yung ions that are present on the reactant and on the product side, ika-cancel mo yun. Cancel yung iron, cancel yung nitrate. Then you are left with 3 Ag plus 3 Cl minus forming 3 AgCl. So since pare-parehas yan, 3 i-round off mo. I-round down mo. Simplify mo. Ag plus Cl forming AgCl. Ito yung net equation natin. Net ionic equation natin. So yung iba kayo na bahala mag-practice. No? Marami naman pwedeng pag-practicean dyan. Okay. So the next one would be acid-base reaction. Okay. So yung acid-base reaction, this is another reaction in aqueous solution kung saan meron tayong production ng acidic and basic compound, no? Acids and bases, okay? So saan galing yung acid? Galing yun sa ano yung napoproduce ng acid? Ang napoproduce ng acid ay H+, no? 'Di ba alam natin yung cation ng ating acids ay H+, okay? Tapos yung ating bases naman, ang kanilang anion ay OH-. Ano ba nangyayari sa H+ and OH-? Yung H+, ito ay acidic, okay? Ang OH-, ito ay basic. Pag pinagsama natin yan, magpo-form tayo ng neutral compound na water. Pag pinaghalo mo yung H, pati yung OH, maghahalo yan to form water. Tapos yung natira, pagsasamahin mo lang. Okay? Okay, so ganun lang. Yung H and OH, pagsasamahin mo to form water, tapos yung natira ay isulat mo na lang. Okay, so pagsamahin mo yung kanyang equation. Paano ba yung ionization process ng ating acids and bases? So similar lang din sa ginagawa natin kanina. For example, we have HCl. Okay? So yung HCl, naghihiwalay yan into H+ and Cl-. Minus yan ha. Yung nitric acid, paghiwalay mo yan into H+ and NO3-. Itong acetic acid, pagpahiwalay mo yan into acetate and H+. Okay? So depende sa dami ng H, ganun karami yung separation. For example, we have diprotic acid such as sulfuric acid. Ito, H2SO4. Ang first dissociation niyan, yung unang process ng paghiwalay ng H+ ay ganito. Kukunin mo yung isang H dyan. So, kunin mo yung isang H, ang matitira ay HSO4. Basically, ito lang yun, binawasan mo lang ng isang H. Pag positive 1 yung H, di ba? Positive 1 yung H+, ibig sabihin negative 1 to. Okay? Tapos yung second ionization ay yung tatanggalin natin yung isa pang H. Okay? So, tanggalin natin yung isa pang H. Dito naman yon. Okay? So, ito na lang yung natirang species natin. Wala na tayo na ito. Ito, maghihiwalay yan into H+ again and your sulfate ion. So, 4, negative 2. Okay? So, ganun. Kapag polyprotic acid, ibig sabihin acid na maraming H, ganito yung nangyari. Step by step yung removal ng H, no? One at a time. For example, H2SO4 yan, ibig sabihin, dalawang reactions yung ma-form, no? The first ionization, isa lang yung matatanggal na H. Ito yung mapoproduce by sulfate. Then the second ionization, yung bisulfate nyo, yung HSO4, mag-ionize na naman yan into H+ and eventually SO4 negative 2. Pag yan ay triprotic acid, such as phosphoric acid, pag yan ay triprotic acid, such as phosphoric acid, edi 3 beses yung ionization yan. Una, isa lang yung matatanggal. Okay, so matitira ay H2PO4. Yung ikalawang ionization, itong H2PO4, matatanggalan na naman ng isang H+, ang matitira ay HPO4. Okay? Then finally, itong HPO4 natin, pwede patanggalan niya ng isa pang H, producing the phosphate. No? Okay, so the overall reaction is that you will get 3H+ and phosphate ions. Pero ito yung pinaka-correct way of writing that. Okay? So step by step yung removal ng H+. For bases naman, wala naman step by step process doon. Diretso OH agad siya. Okay, so again, what happens in acid-base reaction is that we neutralize our acid and base to form water and salt, no? So yung water that is formed from the H plus of your acid and the base is formed from the OH of your base, no? Then we produce the salt, no? Yung remaining cation and an ion from your acids and base. So let's try this. Ang copper hydroxide and phosphoric acid. Yung overall na yung gagawin natin dito. So ating copper hydroxide, that will separate into copper 3 plus and 3 OH minus. Ating phosphoric acid, yung overall ionization yan ay 3 H plus plus isang phosphate 3 minus. Okay? Overall na dapat dito. Nas anong gagawin natin? Yung H and OH, pagsasamahin natin yan to form water. Okay? This time, hindi natin i-snub yung coefficient. Okay? So, ito, tatlong OH yan. Tatlong H plus. So, pag pinagsama mo yan, tatlong water yung mapoproduce. Okay? So, wag i-snub yung ating coefficient this time. Okay? So, tatlong OH, tatlong H plus. So, ibig sabihin, tatlong water yung mapoproduce. Tapos yung natira, copper and phosphate. Adi, pagsamahin mo. Copper and phosphate. Copper 3 phosphate. Okay na nang bahala mag-determine kung may precipitate, ha? Kaya nyo na yan. So, the overall reaction would be CuOH3 plus H3PO4 producing 3H2O plus copper 3 phosphate. Balance na yan. Let's try number 2, aluminum hydroxide and nitric acid. Okay, so aluminum ion plus tatlong OH. Nitric acid. Okay, so may isang H plus and nitrate ion. Okay. Pagsamahin ng OH at H, pati yung Cu, ayan. So, ano mapapansin natin? Yung H and OH, that will produce water, just like what we said earlier. Pero mapapansin mo, ang coefficient ng OH ay 3. Ang coefficient ng H plus ay 1. So, anong gagawin mo? Kunin mo yung common factor nila. 1 times 3 is 3. So, ibig sabihin, kailangan mo sila gawing 3 lahat, no? So, itong equation sa taas, wala na tayong gagawin kasi tatlo na yung OH dito. Itong nasa baba, i-multiply natin yan sa 3 para maging tatlo ang H plus na. Okay? So, ganun lang. Basically, binabalance mo na rin siya, no? Mapapansin nyo, nagbabalance na rin tayo habang ginagawa natin to. So, ibig sabihin niya, may tatlo tayong H2O na mapoproduce plus yung aluminum nitrate na AlNO3. Napansin nyo yung coefficient ng NO3 dito, naging subscript niya, no? So, yun yung purpose niya. Basically, nagbabalance na rin tayo. Ibabalance mo na lang yung OH pati H+. Then, eventually, lahat yan ay balance na, no? So, let's write the final equation. AlOH3 plus tatlong HNO3. Lagay ko yung coefficient na 3. Producing 3H2O and aluminum nitrate. Okay. And balance na yan. Last one, we have barium hydroxide and sulfuric acid. So that will produce barium 2 plus and 2 OHs. Yung H2SO4 naman, that will give us 2H plus and SO4 negative 2. Pagsamahin ng OH, samahin ng BaSO4. So bilangin natin, may dalawang OH, may dalawang H plus, so wala na tayong ibabalance. Pagsasamahin na lang natin lahat. Okay? Basta balance yung water, wala ka ng problema. plus barium sulfate. No? Okay? So, criss-cross mo na yan. So, to write the final equation, dalawa yan, plus basophore. Okay? So, that is our acid-base reaction. Next one, we have acid-base reactions leading to gas formation. No? Kasi sometimes may acid-base reaction na nagpo-produce ng bubbles. Ano example nun? Yung baking soda. No? Pag yung baking soda nilagyan mo ng suka, bubula yun. Okay. Ang tanong, kailan mo malalaman kung may bubbles na ma-form, no? Or may gas na ma-form, no? So there are certain salts na pwede mag-produce ng gases under acidic medium. So ito yung table natin na yon. So ang ions natin that can produce gases in acidic medium are the following. Yung carbonate, kapag yan ay nilagay mo sa acid, magpo-produce yan ng CO2. An example niyan, yung baking soda. Yung sulfite ion, SO3 negative, pag yan ay nilagay mo sa acid, yan ay magpo-produce ng sulfur dioxide. No? Toxic yan. Sulfide ion, pag yan ay nilagay mo sa acid, magpo-produce yan ng hydrosulfuric acid or dihydrogen sulfide. No? Mabaho yan. Ano yung amoy na ito? Para siyang amoy ng nabubulok na itlog. Ganon yung amoy niyan. Okay? Actually, nabubulok na itlog. May mga sulfide yon, then yung acid dahil sa bacterial contamination. Okay? So yung acid na pinoproduce ng mga bacteria that causes the sulfide ions doon sa eggshell, sa egg mismo, sa egg membrane, na mag-form ng gases. Yung gases na yun yung mabaho, itong H2S, dihydrogen sulfide. Okay? So, yun. So, silang tatlo lang yung nakakagawa niyan, no? So, carbonate, pag nilagay mo sa acid, maglalabas yan ng CO2. Sulfite, pag nilagay mo yan sa acid, mag-form yan ng SO2. Yung sulfide, pag yan ay nilagay mo sa acid, maglalabas yan ng H2S. Automatic yon. Okay? So, let's try the following. Barium carbonate plus phosphoric acid producing, ano yung mapoproduce nila? Meron kang carbonate. Okay? So, ito ay acid. So, ibig sabihin yan, automatically may CO2 ka. Okay? So, ganun lang. Paano na yung iba? Yung iba, madali na lang na. Teka lang. Pakita natin. Gawin nating ions muna. No? Okay, so we will form barium 2+, carbonate ion, then tatlong H+, and phosphate ion. Mas ano alam natin, dito sa CO3, makakuha tayo dyan ng CO2, no? So, bawas na natin dyan yung CO2. Ano yung matitira sa CO3? Pag wala na yung CO2, edi, O negative 2. Okay? So, kasi pag pinagsama mo yung CO2 plus O negative 2, magiging CO3 yan, tapos yung charge nila magiging negative 2. Mag-split lang talaga sila. Magkakaroon ka ng oxide ion. Okay? So, ganun po gagawin natin. Kapag may carbonate ka, tapos may H plus ka, paghiwalay mo yon further into CO2, magiging gas yan, and oxide ion. Okay? So, ganun yung step natin, ha? So, wala na to. Okay? So, ganyan. Tapos, ano yung makakagawa ng water dito? Baka nag-iisip tayo. Ano yung magagawa ng water dito? Ito yung H plus, tapos yung oxygen. Okay? So, itong oxygen na to, kukuha yan ng dalawang H plus. Okay? Para maka-form ng water. Kasi ano yung problema natin dito? Yung ating H plus ay 3. So, ibig sabihin, i-math, no? I-least common denominator na least common multiple natin, LCM. So, ang ratio ng H plus to oxygen ay 2 to 1. Na? So, dalawang H plus, isang oxide ion. Kapag meron tayong 6 na H plus, ilang oxide ion ang kailangan? 3. So, ibig sabihin, kailangan natin i-multiply itong taas by 3. So, times 3, times 3, times 3, times 3. Itong nasa baba naman, so since kailangan 6 yung H plus natin para maging 3 yung oxide ion natin, i-multiply natin to sa 2. 2. Tapos yung 3 na yan, magiging 6 na yan. So, ito magiging 2. Okay? So, ganun yung gagawin natin, ha? Basically, nagbabalance na tayo habang nagpe-predict ng products. Ganun lang. Okay? Okay, tapos ano yung alam natin? Itong oxide ion, pati itong H+, that will form water. So, ilang water ma-form natin dyan? 3, no? Kasi pag dalawa yung H+, isa yung oxygen, isang water. Pag 4 yung H+, dalawa yung oxide ion, dalawang water yon. Pag 6 yung H+, 3 yung oxide ion, tatlong water yon. Okay? So we can form 3 water molecules here, 3H2O. May 3 carbon dioxide gas tayo, and eventually, itong barium phosphate, huwag mo napansin yung coefficient niyan, i-criss-cross na lang natin, no? So that will give us Ba3, PO4, 2. Okay? So yung 3 naging subscript, yung 2 naging subscript din nila. Balance na yan. Okay? So let's write the final equation. Barium, 3 barium carbonate plus 2H plus H3PO4 forming 3CO2, 3H2O plus barium phosphate. So, ganun. Mapapansin nyo habang nagpe-predict tayo ng products, nagbabalance na rin tayo at the same time. Ganun kasi ginagawa talaga dito. Well, let's try this one. Copper sulfite and copper 2 sulfite and hydrochloric acid. Sulfite yan, SO3 eh. So, hindi yan sulfate ha. So, ibig sabihin yung sulfite natin kaya makaproduce ng SO2. Okay? So, gawin nating ions yan. Copper 2 plus, SO3 minus 2. Ito, H plus, then Cl minus. Ano yung nakikita natin? May H plus tayo, may SO3 tayo. So, that means we have to break down our SO3 into SO2 and O negative 2. So, same lang ng ginawa natin sa carbonate, no? Split natin siya into 2. Okay? Then, ano pa alam natin? For every oxide ion, for every O2, kailangan ng dalawang H plus. So, that means we have to multiply this equation by 2. So, dalawang HCl, dalawang H plus, dalawang Cl minus. Okay? So, ano alam natin? Oxide ion, 2H plus, will form 1 water molecule plus sulfur dioxide plus the salt, copper 2 chloride. Yung kanyang coefficient naging subscript. Yung coefficient naging subscript. Okay? So the final equation would be copper sulfite plus 2HCl forming SO2, H2O, and eventually copper 2 chloride. The last one, yung may sulfide naman. May sulfide naman tayo. Anong ions mapoproduce natin dyan? Okay. Zinc sulfide, that's zinc 2 plus and sulfide ion. H2SO4, dalawang H plus and SO4, negative 2. So dito, wala tayong ano. 'Di ba ang napoproduce natin ay wala tayong mapoproduce na water dito. Okay? Kasi SO4 to eh, no? So basically, ang mapoproduce lang natin ay hydrogen sulfide. Wala na tong excess oxygen eh. So wala tayong water na mapoproduce. No? Okay? Sulfide lang talaga yan. Plus itong salt na to. Okay? So for every sulfide ion, dalawang H yung kailangan to form the H2S. Plus yung ating salt, zinc sulfate. Okay, so our final reaction would be zinc sulfide, H2SO4, forming hydrogen sulfide plus zinc sulfate. Wala nang water, no? Kasi wala tong oxygen eh. So wala kang water na mapaproduce dyan. Okay, so ganun lang. Ito yung example lang. So wala siyang water kapag sulfide ion ang mapoproduce. Okay, so that's basically it. No? Kung gusto nyo, ayan, ayan yung ating answers. Screenshot nyo na lang. Then, pag gusto nyo aralin ulit, replay nyo na lang yung video. Okay, so I will proceed with the next topic. Itong natira, kayo na bahala mag-answer niyan. Okay, so next one we will have the oxidation reduction reactions, redox reactions. No? So before we understand the redox reaction, bago tayo magpunta sa mismong redox, kailangan muna natin malaman ang basic concept ng oxidation number. Ano ba yung oxidation number? Ang oxidation number ay yung charge na rin mismo. Charge siya ng atoms natin in our ionic compounds. Ngayon, paano natin malalaman yung charges ng compounds, no? Okay, so mayroon tayong 6 na rule na kailangan isabuhay para malaman natin yung charges ng ating atoms in our molecules or ions, no? So, kailangan natin isabuhay ito. Okay. So, rule number 1, in determining oxidation number, the oxidation number of an element in an elementary substance is 0. Ano ba meaning ng elementary substance? Ang elementary substance ay molecule na nagko-contain ng same atoms. For example, Cl2, O2, H2, T4, ano pa? Br2, I2. So ano mapapansin mo, yan ay mga molecules, no? Pero ang atoms nila ay iisa. Kapag ganun yung case, ang oxidation number ng atom ng I, ng Cl, ng O, ng H, ng P, pati ng Br, lahat yan ay 0. Okay? So the oxidation number of chlorine in Cl2 is 0. The oxygen for phosphorus, that is also 0. Okay? So basta ito yung elementary substance, they are molecules of the same atom. Walang oxidation number sila. 0 yung sagot na. The next one. The oxidation number of an element in a monoatomic ion is equal to the charge of that ion. So for example, Cl minus. So ano yung charge ng Cl? Negative 1. So ibig sabihin ng oxidation number niya ay negative 1 din. Ang sodium, positive 1. Sodium ion, Na+, positive 1. So ibig sabihin ang kanyang oxidation number is also positive 1. Another example would be O negative 2, that is a monoatomic anion. No? So ang kanyang oxidation number is also negative 2 because of the charge being negative 2 as well. So ganun lang. Kung ano yung charge ng monoatomic ion, yun ang kanyang oxidation number. Rule number 3. Certain elements have the same oxidation number in all their compounds. No? So, ibig sabihin, may mga atoms na iisa yung kanyang charges by default. No? Keyword by default. No? Yan yung kanyang oxidation number by default. No? So, ano yung mga atoms na yun na may default charge? No? Group 1 and group 2, pati yung fluorine. Okay? So, yung group 1 atoms natin, always positive 1 yan. Yung group 2 atoms natin, always positive 2. And yung fluorine atom, always negative 1 ang kanyang formal charge. I mean yung kanyang oxidation number. So keep that in mind, ha? Next one. Kailangan magkakabisado talaga kayo dito. Okay, lagay nyo sa index card. Or i-print nyo to. Okay lang din. Next one, we will have hydrogen in a compound has an oxidation number of positive 1 unless it is combined with metal, which in case is negative 2. So, ibig sabihin lang nun, if yung ating hydrogen ay bonded with non-metal, ang kanyang oxidation number ay positive 1. Pero kapag siya ay bonded with metal, ang hydrogen, ang oxidation number niya ay nagiging negative 1. For example, HCl. Ang Cl ay non-metal. So, ibig sabihin, H is positive 1. Example, sodium hydride. Ang H ay bonded with sodium, which is metal. So, ibig sabihin nun, yung ating hydrogen ay automatically negative 1. Okay, next one. The oxidation numbers in a neutral species is 0, and in a polyatomic ion, that is equal to the charge of the ion. So, ibig sabihin, pag pinagsama-sama mo, yung oxidation number ng molecule, kailangan maging equal yon sa charge niya. Let's have, for example, pH 3. Example dito. Ano yung charge ng molecule niyan? Yan ay 0. So, wala nakalagay doon. So, 0 nga yun. Diba? Always may nakalagay sa top right kapag may charge. So, kapag wala, edi walang charge yon. So, sabi ng rule number 5, charge is equal to the sum. Ayusin ko. That is the sum of the oxidation number of atom times the number of atoms. Okay? So, ang case natin dito, ang pH 3, ang charge niya ay 0. Okay? So, with this equation, we can actually determine the charges or the oxidation number of the other atoms as well. So, for example, pH 3. Ang H, this is bonded with non-metal. Ang sabi doon, kapag H is bonded with non-metal, yung P, yan ay positive 1. So, ibig sabihin, tatlong H times ang kanyang oxidation number ay positive 1. Okay? Plus yun sa phosphorus, may isa kang phosphorus times ano yung charge? I don't know, question mark. So, we can turn this into an algebraic equation. Okay? So, palitan natin yung ating terms. So, this will be 3 times 1. This will be positive 3 plus 1 times question mark, the question mark. No? So, ito yung unknown oxidation number which corresponds to phosphorus. No? So, algebra lang. So, solve for the question mark. So, question mark will be equal to negative 3. So, that means the oxidation number of phosphorus is negative 3. To verify that, i-plug in natin yan dito sa equation. Kasi kapag nilagay natin to negative 3 dito, pag pinag-add natin lahat yan, dapat ang charge ng molecule ay 0. Is it true? So, tignan natin. Tatlong hydrogen times positive 1 plus isang phosphorus times negative 3. Yan ba ay 0 din? 0 din ba yan? Question mark. So, that is 3 minus 3. And yes, yan ay 0. No? So, tama yung ating oxidation number ng phosphorus. No? Yan yung checking natin. So, ganun lang. Pwede ka gumawa ng algebraic expression as long as you know the default oxidation numbers of certain atoms. Lahat ng group 1, positive 1. Lahat ng group 2, positive 2. Ang fluorine ay negative 1. Ang hydrogen ay negative 1 kapag bonded with metal. Positive 1 kapag bonded with non-metal. Keep in mind yun na yun. Ano pa isang example? Let's have let's have N2H4. Ano yung charge niyan? 0. Wala akong nilagay dito sa top right eh. So, ang charge ay 0. So, saan yan equal? Sa number of nitrogen atoms, dalawa yon times its oxidation number. Ano oxidation number ng nitrogen? Hindi natin alam. So, question mark. No? plus yung number ng hydrogen atom, may 4 tayong hydrogen, times ano yung charge ng hydrogen? Hydrogen is bonded with non-metal. Yung nitrogen, non-metal yan. So, ibig sabihin, positive 1 yan. Okay, so let's convert that into an algebraic equation. So, 0 equals 2x. X na lang to. Yan. That's 2x plus 4 times 1 is 4. Let's solve for x. X is equal to -2. So that means the oxidation number of nitrogen is -2. Okay, so ganun lang. Now let's proceed with the last rule. The last rule pertains to oxygen naman. By default, oxygen has an oxidation number of -2 by default. However, it may change, no? If it is bonded with group 1 metal or group 2 metal, no? Okay. So, yan, yung oxygen natin, -2 yan by default, no? Maliban na lang kung bonded yan with group 1 metal or group 2 metal. For example, we have here sodium oxide. The oxidation number of oxygen in sodium oxide is solved as this. Ito yung nasa ginagawa natin kanina. Equal yan sa -2, which is yung default charge ng oxygen. However, there are other versions of this compound. For example, sodium Na2O2, no? Sodium peroxide, no? Sodium peroxide tawag dyan. Okay, so ang oxidation number niya, if you solve for the oxidation number of oxygen, would be -1. So, pwede magbago. And then, eventually, ito na sa last one, ang kanyang oxidation number ay -1/2. So, ano meaning nun? So, ibig sabihin, our oxygen can have different charges if it is bonded with group 1 and group 2 metal. However, by default, kapag hindi siya nakabond dyan sa group 1 or group 2, -2 yan parate. Okay? So, ganun lang. Let's try to do this activity. Assign an oxidation number to each of the following species. N2. Ano masasabi natin sa N2? Yan ay molecule na ang atom ay iisa. Dalawang nitrogen atom yan. Ibig sabihin yan, without doubt, ang kanyang oxidation number is 0. Anong rule yan? Rule number 1. Diba sabi sa rule number 1, the oxidation number of an element in an elementary substance is 0. Okay? So that if the molecule contains the same atom, so yan, 0 yung kanyang charge. I mean, 0 yung kanyang oxidation number. Automatic yan. N3 minus, this is a monoatomic ion. So ano sabi natin? The oxidation of the atom in a monoatomic ion is the charge itself. No? So ibig sabihin yan ay -3. Nitrate, NO3. Ito, solve natin to, no? So, ano yung pwede natin gamitin equation? Charge is equals to the sum of the oxidation number of atom times the number of atoms. Okay? So, ganun yung equation na gagamitin natin. NO3. Ano yung charge? -1. Ano yung mga atoms? Sulat ko na lang dito. Nitrogen, oxygen. Okay. So, ilang nitrogen meron? Isa. Ilang oxygen? 3. Sino yung may charge dyan by default? Yung oxygen, di ba? Sabi natin yung oxygen natin, yan ay -2 by default unless it is paired with group 1 or group 2 metals. Ang nitrogen, group 5 yan eh. So, by default, oxygen is -2 times -2 times x. So, let's solve for that. -1 equals x plus 3 times negative 2 yan. So 3 times negative 2, negative 6. Minus pala to. Minus 6. So transpose mo lang. So you will get x is equals to positive 5. So for NO3, nitrogen is positive 5. Oxygen is negative 2. Okay, so yun yung kanilang oxidation numbers. So mag-skip ako ng ibang items na. So let's try itong Cr2O7, dichromate. Ano yung charge? Negative 2. Okay. So for chromate and for oxygen. Okay. So between the two, chromate and oxygen, sino yung may charge by default? That is oxygen. Kasi sabi natin yung oxygen, that is negative 2 unless bonded with group 1 and group 2. Ang chromate ay nasa transition metal. Hindi yan group 1, hindi rin yan group 2. So, ibig sabihin, negative 2 talaga yung oxygen dito. So that's ilang oxygen atom? 7 oxygen atoms times negative 2. Ilang chromate atoms? 2 times X. Hindi natin alam yung charge ng chromium sa chromate, no? So let's solve for that algebraically. 2 equals 2x times plus negative 14. Right, solving for x, that will give us 14 minus 2, 12 divided by 2, 6. No? So the charge of the chromium here is 6, positive 6. No? So chromium is positive 6, oxygen is negative 2. Yan yung kanilang oxidation numbers. Lastly, we have the permanganate, MnO4, negative. So, ang charge yan ay negative 1. Negative 1 equals manganese and oxygen. Between the two, sino may default charge? So, my charge by default is oxygen kasi manganese is not group 1, not also group 2. So, ibig sabihin, oxygen is negative 2 talaga. Ilang oxygen atom meron? 4 times negative 2. Okay. Ilang manganese meron? 1 times X. Hindi ko alam kung ilan yon. So, let's solve for it algebraically. So, that's negative 1 equals X. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. No? Solving for X, that will give us positive 7. So, the charge of manganese here is, or the oxidation number here is positive 7. For oxygen, that is negative 2 pa rin. Okay, so you can practice different ions here. No? So, try natin ito, last one, PTCl6. Okay. So, last one na tayo, PTCl6, negative. So, the charge is negative 1 equals to platinum plus chloride. No? Chlorine. Sino sa dalawa may charge? Wala, di ba? Okay, actually meron. Kasi di ba sabi natin kanina, fluorine yung meron by default. No? Sabi natin dito, fluorine is always negative 1. However, yung other halide, yung other group 7 atoms, negative 1 din sila. No? Hindi nga lang always. No? Pero generally speaking, negative 1 sila. No? Okay? So, ibig sabihin nun, yung Cl natin, generally, -1 yung kanyang oxidation number. Times the number of chlorine atoms, which is 6. Platinum, isa lang, times X. No? So, let's solve for it algebraically. X minus 6. So, that will be X equals 5. Okay, so platinum here is positive 5. Cl is -1. Again ha, yung sa group 7, generally speaking, -1 sila. Although there are cases na hindi sila -1. Okay? Pero generally, -1 yan. So yun lang. So yun yung introductory before we proceed with the oxidation reduction reactions. No? So continue na natin yan. Okay, so ano ba nangyayari sa oxidation reduction reaction? So from the word itself, two reactions are happening. Ang tawag natin doon ay yung oxidation reaction and yung reduction reaction. Ang short term dyan ay redox. No? So red is for the reduction, ox is for the oxidation. So that means two reactions are happening at the same time. No? So ano yung kwento nila? For oxidation reaction, what happens here is that your atom is losing electron. So ano nangyayari sa atom pag nawawalan siya ng electron? The atom becomes positively charged. So as a consequence, the oxidation number increases whenever your atom undergoes an oxidation reaction. Pag reduction reaction naman, what happens here is that your atom is gaining electron. So ano nangyari kapag yung atom nadadagdagan ng electron, naging negative yung charge niya, no? Or ang kanyang oxidation number magde-decrease, no? Okay? So to simplify everything, para hindi siya mahirap kabisaduhin, may mnemonic device tayo na tinatawag naming oil rig, no? So ano kwento ng oil rig? Oxidation is losing. Ano yung nalulose? Electron. Reduction is gaining. Ano yung nagigain? Electron. So whenever you lose your electron, ano nangyari sa atom? It becomes more positive or the oxidation number increases. Kapag yung atom naman nag-undergo ng reduction reaction, it will gain electron. Ibig sabihin, magiging negative siya or the oxidation number decreases. Okay? So to memorize all this, kabisaduhin mo lang yung oil rig. Oxidation is losing, reduction is gaining electrons. Okay? So let's look at this equation. One way to tell kung sino yung oxidation at sino yung reduction reaction is ganito. You check their tawag doon. Check mo yung kanyang oxidation number, no? So for example, yung zinc dito. Ano oxidation number ng zinc dyan? Zn lang yan. So walang charge. Edi 0 yung kanyang oxidation number. Pagdating dito sa product side, ano nangyari? Naging positive 2 siya. Okay? So ano ibig sabihin nun? From 0 to -2, there is an increase in the oxidation number of zinc. Okay, so since the oxidation number of zinc increases, that means it underwent an oxidation reaction. Tignan naman natin yung H+. So, set aside mo muna yung 2, yung coefficient. We're focused on the species alone. Sa H+, ang kanyang charge ay positive 1. Pagdating dito sa dulo, H2, that is an elementary compound. Elementary compound yan. So, ano yung charge ng hydrogen dyan? 0. So, what happened to the charge is from positive 1, naging 0. So, there is a decrease in the oxidation number. Hence, that is reduction reaction. So, nag-undergo siya ng reduction reaction. Okay. So, ano yung ginagawa para mabalance yung redox reactions? Okay. Kung mapapansin natin dito sa ating sa ating handouts, Itong equation, ang ginawa natin ay in-split siya into two equations. Ang tawag natin sa dalawang equation na to ay half equation, in which makikita natin yung process that undergoes the oxidation reaction and the reduction reaction. O ngayon, turuan ko kayo kung paano gumawa niyan, no? So, ang example natin ay zinc plus H plus, no? So, naging ano yan? Zinc 2 plus pati H2. Okay? So, ito yung ating example dyan. So, paano tayo gumagawa ng half equations dito? Madali lang. To do your half equations, you have to pair the reactant and the product side in terms of the same atoms. For example, yung zinc dito and yung zinc doon, pwede mo sila ipag-pair. Yung H plus dito, pati yung H2 dito, pwede mo yan ipag-pair. Yung two pairs na yan, that could either be our oxidation reaction or our reduction reaction. So, yan yung half equations natin. Kapag hiwalayin natin sila. So, zinc forming zinc 2 plus, then H plus forming H2. Okay? So, by just looking at the oxidation number, we can tell na ito ay oxidation kasi 0 yung kanyang charge dito, naging positive 2. So, there is a loss of electron. Dito naman, from positive 1, naging 0 yung kanyang oxidation number. So, there is a decrease in the oxidation number or the substance is reduced. No? Pero, kasi kung gagawin mo yung oxidation number ng paulit-ulit, medyo mahaba yan, no? Ang daming mong isosolve, gaya ng ina-algebra natin kanina. So para mas mapadali yung buhay ng pag-determine ng oxidation or reduction reaction, bibigyan ko kayo ng trick, no? So ano yung trick? Ganito. Nakikita nyo yung charges, yung charge sa taas. You have to balance that in a redox reaction. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, for a redox reaction, kung ano yung charge sa kaliwa, that must be also the charge sa kabila. Ngayon, paano mo ibabalance yung 0 pati yung positive 2? You have to introduce electrons. No? Kaya nga sabi natin kanina sa PowerPoint, when there is a transfer of electron, that is a redox reaction. Ano yung electron? 'Di ba? Negatively charged particle 'yan, 'di ba? So ibig sabihin, you have to add enough electrons to the side of your half equation para maging balance yung charges nila. For example, ang charge dito 0, ang charge dito positive 2. So saan ako naglalagay ng electron? Maglalagay ka ng electron dun sa mataas ang charge. Kasi ang purpose ng electron is to bring down the charge, no? Kasi negative yung charge ng electron. Okay? So that means I have to add my electron on the product side here sa taas. Each electron is negative 1, yung kanyang charge, no? Ngayon, ito 0 yung charge dito. Ito ilan na? So this is 2 minus 1 positive 1. So, ilang electrons dapat para maging parehas silang 0 yung charge? So, kailangan ko ng dalawang electron para positive 2 plus 2 times negative 1. Okay? So, minumultiply yung coefficient sa charge, ha? So, this is 2 times negative 1. Okay? So, ano na yun? Positive 2 plus 2 times negative 1. So, that will now be 0. So, 0 na yung charge dito sa kabila. 0 na rin yung charge dito sa left side. So this equation is balanced in terms of atoms and the charge. May isang zinc dito, may isang zinc doon, balance yung atoms. Yung charges, balance din. 0 yung charge dito, 0 na rin yung charge dito since we added 2 electrons. Ang aking visual cue, kapag yan ay oxidation reaction, ang electron ay nasa product side. Yun yung visual cue ko. Hindi na ako kasi nag-oxidation number. Ginaganito ko na lang agad to. So kapag nasa product side yung electron, that is oxidation reaction, oxidation. O yun sa baba naman tayo. O bago mo i-charge yung bago mo i-balance yung charges, you balance the atoms first. May dalawang hydrogen dito, may isa doon. So, I have to multiply this H plus by 2 para balance yung atoms. Then, you determine the charges. Ano yung charges natin? May dalawa kang positive 1 dito, wala. So, that's 2 times positive 1, positive 2 yung charge sa reactant. Ito, 0 yung charge dito. So, ano gagawin natin? We have to bring down the positive 2 charge into 0. We always add the electron to the side with the highest charge. In this case, itong nasa left naman. Positive 2 to, ito 0. So, ito mas mataas, dito yung electron. Ang tanong, ilang electron? Okay? So, kada electron, negative 1 yung baba niya. May dalawa kang positive charge, no? Gusto mo maging 0. So, ano yung kailangan mo gawin sa 2 para maging 0? I-subtract sa 2. Or, you introduce 2 electrons, no? By introducing 2 electrons, the charges are now the same. 0 sa product, sa reactant, 2 times negative 1 plus 2 times positive 1, which is negative 2 plus 2, 0 na yon. Okay? Kapag ang electron mo nasa product side, sabi natin, oxidation yon. Kapag ang electron nasa reactant side, ang tawag doon ay reduction. So, dito natin makikita yung losing and gaining electron. Pag oxidation, pag sinabing lose electron, ibig sabihin nun, nasa product side yung electron, naglabas siya ng electron. Pag sa reduction, siya ay nag-gain ng electron, ibig sabihin, nasa reactant side yung electron. Okay? After balancing your equations, half equations, what's left with us is to combine them na lang. Pagsamahin na lang natin sila. So we have 2 electrons, 2H plus, zinc, teka lang. This is zinc 2 plus, H2, and 2 electrons. Then, katulad ng ginagawa natin sa net ionic equation, ika-cancel din natin yung electron, no? So, kailangan parehas yung dami ng electron. Pag 2 dito, dapat 2 din sa kabila, no? Paano po kapag hindi yan balance? Mamaya sasagutin natin, no? Pero for now, since parehas yung 2, pwede natin ma-cancel yan, no? Our final equation must not show the electrons. Kailangan walang electrons na nakikita sa final equation. Okay, so this is our final equation. This is the redox reaction of zinc and hydronium ion producing zinc 2 plus and hydrogen gas. Okay. So, mag-practice pa tayo, no? Hindi. Mamaya na yung practice. Tuloy na tayo sa pag-balance ng redox reaction. Ito yung question, no? Paano tayo mag-balance ng redox reaction? So, yung mga tip na sinabi ko kanina, kailangan nyo pa rin yun, no? So, ano yung mga tip na sinabi ko? You balance the atoms first, no? Balance mo muna yung atoms, then balance the charges, no? Okay. Pero ito yung ating modification. Ano yung mga modification natin? Mamaya, may makikita tayong examples na ang atoms natin ay bigla-bigla na lang sobra. Kunwari, walang oxygen, tapos walang oxygen sa reactant side, tapos pagdating sa product side, may oxygen. Ano gagawin mo doon? Okay? So, ito yung mga modification natin. Sa balancing atoms, ang kailangan mo gawin, in order to balance oxygens, in order to balance your oxygens, you have to add H2O. you have to add H2O. So, ito yung mga tips, no? Screenshot nyo na lang mamaya. To balance hydrogens, add H plus naman. Okay? So, ito lang yung modification natin. Ito yung previous steps natin. Balance the atoms, balance the charges. Pero ang modification natin is that, teka lang. Number 3 is to combine, no? The half equations. So, ano yung modification natin? So, number 1, in order to balance your atoms, kunwari biglang may lumitaw ng oxygen, you have to add water. Mamaya pakita ko yung example niyan. If you want to balance your hydrogens, add H plus naman. Okay? Then you balance the charges. Teka lang. Wait lang ha. Tawag lang. Okay, so balik tayo. Skip nyo na lang yung part na tumawag ako, no? Anyway, so yun lang naman yung modification natin, no? So you have to add H2O to balance oxygens, and you had to add H plus to balance the hydrogens. Then next you will balance the charges and you combine the half equations. And you should take note that when you're combining the half equations, kailangan same yung dami ng electron sa oxidation and sa reduction reactions, no? So practice tayo. Let's have this one. Dito na lang. So let's practice dito. So this is our equation. We have to balance this. Okay? So paano gagawin natin dito? So sabi natin kanina, we have to write the half equation. So paano yon? Pag-split mo sila in terms of the similar atoms. Itong MnO4, similar yan with Mn kasi para sila may manganese. Itong Cl at yung ClO3, parehas sila may chlorine, so they are similar as well. Okay? So we have to split them, paghiwalayin natin sila, in order to completely balance them. No? Ayusin muna natin sila one by one. So let's start with MnO4. Okay? So, yan yung ating equation na isa. Yan yung isang half equation. Then, the other half equation would be the Cl2, ClO3. Okay? Balance natin tong MnO4 muna. We have to balance the atoms. Yun yung first step. So, may isang Mn dito, may isang Mn doon. So, wala na tayong gagawin. Balance na yung manganese. Pero ano yung, biglang nawala? May 4 na oxygen sa reactant side, tapos sa product side, walang oxygen. Ano gagawin natin doon pag walang oxygen? Sabi natin kanina, in order to balance oxygens, we have to add water. No? So, ibig sabihin, mag-a-add tayo ng water sa side na walang oxygen or yung kinulang yung oxygen. No? So, may 4 na oxygen dito. Ilang water yung idadagdag? No, ito yung question. Ilang oxygen ba meron sa water? Di ba? Isa lang. No? So, that means, if 4 yung kailangan nating oxygen, we have to add 4 H2Os. Dapat 4 na water ang idadagdag natin para 4 din yung oxygen. 4 na oxygen, 4 times 1 na oxygen, 4 din. O ngayon, ano yung problema naman? Nagkaroon naman bigla ng H, di ba? Dito, meron kang 8 H, may 4, tapos may 2, 4 times 2, 8. May 8 H ka dyan, sa reactant side, wala kang H. So, paano binabalance yung hydrogens? We add H+. So, mag-add tayo ng H+ sa side na kulang yung H. No? Ilang H+ kailangan? Di 8. So, balance na ba yung atoms natin? Tignan natin. 8 H. 4 times 2, 8. 8 H. Isang Mn, 4 na oxygen. 4 times 1. Okay, so balance na yung atoms natin. Dito naman tayo sa Cl2. Balance muna natin yung atoms ha. Ilan Cl meron dito? 2. Dito sa product side, ilan? Isa lang. Cl lang. So, times 2 natin yan. Tapos, ano yung isang problema? Dito sa product side, ilan yung oxygen natin? May 3 dito, times 2. So, 3 times 2 is 6 oxygen sa product side. Sa reactant side, wala tayong oxygen. So, ano kailangan natin gawin? Magdadagdag ng H2O, no? Para maging equal sila sa dami ng oxygen sa product side. So, 6H2O ang kailangan. Tapos, ano na? So, balance na yung chlorine, 2. Balance na yung oxygen, 3 times 2, 6. 6 times 1, 6 din. Okay, so balance na yung oxygen. Ano na lang yung problema? Yung hydrogen. Ilang hydrogen meron dito? 6, 2, 12 yan. So, sa product side, wala. So, mag-a-add tayo ng 12 na H+. So, balance na yung atoms natin. So, tapos na tayo sa step 1. Okay na tayo dyan. Sunod, balance the charges. Ayun, charge naman. So, bilangin natin yung charge dito sa left and right side ng dalawang half equations, no? Para alam natin kung saan tayo maglalagay ng electrons. So, dito muna tayo sa Mn. So, may 8 times 1. 8 times positive 1. So, ito yung 8. Ito yung positive 1. So, positive 8 plus may isang MnO4 times the charge negative 1. So, ilan to? 8 minus 1, 7. Okay, 7 yung charge sa left side. Positive 7. Sa product side, ilan? O, yung Mn, isa times positive 2. Tapos yung water, ano yung charge ng water? O, wala nakalagay sa top right. So, ibig sabihin, 0 yung charge nun. So, 1 times 2 plus 4 times 0, edi 2 yung charge niya. Okay, so sa left side, we have positive 7 charge. On the right side, we have 2 charge. Positive 2 charge. Saan tayo maglalagay ng electron? Sa side na mataas ang charge, no? So, saan yung side na mataas yung charge? Itong left side, positive 7. So, ano gagawin natin? Dito tayo mag-a-add ng electron. Ang tanong, ilan? we should add enough electron para maging same yung charges nila. So, ibig sabihin, gagayahin natin yung lowest charge, itong positive 2. So, itong 7, gagawin natin 2. Paano gagawin yon? So, maglalagay tayo ng negative 5. Kasi 7 minus 5 is 2. So, magpapantay sila. So, ibig sabihin, I have to add 5 electrons here. Okay? By adding 5 electrons, so yung 7 na yan, magiging 2 na rin. Okay? So, ganun. Kailangan maging pantay yung charge dito. Okay? O, dito naman tayo sa baba. O, 6H2O. So, that's 6 times 0. Walang charge yung H2O. 1 times 0 ulit. Ang Cl2 ay walang charge. Okay? Sa product side, we have 2 times negative 1 plus 12 times positive 1. Okay? So, sa reactant side, wala tayong charge. Puro 0 yan eh. Dito sa product side, we have 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2, plus 12 times 1, which is 12. Negative 2 plus 12 is 10. Positive 10. So, saan tayo maglalagay ng electron? Sa side na mataas yung charge, which is yung positive 10. So, gagawin natin, etong 10, gagawing 0 para magpantay. So, ilang electrons yon? 10 electrons. No? So, we have to add 10 electrons here para ma-minus 10 natin. No? Magba-minus 10 tayo. So, the charges will now be equal to 0. So, balance na yung charge na itong nasa taas. Balance na rin yung charge na itong nasa baba. No? So, tapos na tayo sa second step. Ngayon naman, punta tayo sa third step. Combine the equations. Ano yung sabi ko kanina, di ba? Sabi ko kanina, kailangan yung ating electrons ay same yung number. Same dapat yung dami nila para mapagsama mo sila. Kaso ano yung problema natin dito? Yung electron sa taas ay 5, yung electron sa baba ay 10. So, hindi mo pwede pagsamahin yan agad-agad. Kasi kailangan pantay yung dami ng electron. So, anong gagawin natin? So, ang gagawin natin ay pagpapantayin natin yan. So, ano yung common multiple ng 5 and 10? 10 yon. So, basically, itong 5, itong equation sa taas, i-multiply natin yung coefficients by 2. Ito times 2 natin yan, lahat. Okay? So, i-times 2 natin. So, itong 5, magiging times 2. So, magiging 10 na yan. Itong 8 times 2, magiging 16. Itong MnO4, yung isa dyan, magiging times 2. Ito din, times 2. Tapos yung H2O, magiging times 2, which is 8. Tapos yan, after multiplying a coefficient, no, para magpantay yung electrons, pwede na natin yan pagsamahin. Required yan, ha? Pagsamahin na natin. 10 electron, 16H+, 2MnO4, 6H2O, Cl2, 2Mn2+, 8H2O, 2ClO3, 12H+, and 10 electron. Okay? So, kailangan ganun. Kailangan pantay yung dami ng electron. Tapos, pag pantay na yung dami ng electron, saka mo sila pagsamahin. Tapos, ano na yung kailangan natin gawin? Cancel mo na yung similar terms. So, ano yung mga similar terms natin dyan? Sa reactant and product side, yung electrons. 10 electron dito, 10 electron doon, cancel. Ano pa? H2O. May 6 dito, may 8 doon. So, cancel natin yon. Pag kinancel ko yung 6 dito, mawawala to. Pag itong 8, binawasan ko ng 6, magiging 2 na lang yung H2O sa product side. No? Isasubtract mo yung 6 sa parehas na side. O yung H plus, ganun din. May 12 dito sa product side, may 16 sa reactant side. So magsusubtract ako ng 12, mawawala yun na sa product side. Itong nasa reactant side, 16 minus 12 is 4. Tama ba? 4 nga. Okay, so na-cancel ko na yung mga bagay na kailangan ko i-cancel, no? Tapos nagsara yung aking app. Buti na save naman. Okay? So, ganun. Ika-cancel mo lang yung mga pare-parehas na terms. And pag wala ka na ma-cancel, tapos ka na, no? So, i-rewrite mo na lang siya. 4H plus 2MnO4 Cl2 producing 2Mn2 plus 2ClO3 and 2H2O. Okay? So, this is our redox equation. Yan na yung ating balanced redox equation. Ang daming ginawa, no? Basta keep in mind lang itong steps. Balance the atoms, balance the charges, combine the half equations, no? And whenever balancing atoms, pag kinulang ka ng oxygen, magdagdag ng water. Pag kinulang ka ng hydrogens, magdagdag ng H+. By the way, ito yung tanong. Ano yung reduction reaction? Ano yung oxidation reaction? So looking at the equation, itong nasa taas, ang electron ay nasa left side. So ibig sabihin yan ay reduction. Itong nasa babang equation, ang electron ay nasa product side. So this is oxidation. Nag-lose siya ng electron. Okay? So ganun. So masasabi natin na ang MnO4 nag-undergo ng oxidation reaction. Ang Cl2 nag-undergo ng reduction. Ay, baliktad pala ako. Pinagbaliktad ko kasi nandito. Okay. So, ang MnO4, siya ay nag-undergo ng reduction reaction. So, pinapakita yun dito sa equation na nasa taas. Ang Cl2, ito ay nag-undergo ng oxidation reaction as shown as dito sa equation na nasa baba. Okay? So, permanganate is reduced, chlorine is oxidized. Okay? Tapos ito yung balancing. Kuha pa ako ng last one example na lang para tapos na tayo. Na? Ito na lang. Fe2 plus okay, so gawin natin to. Fe2 plus NO3 producing Fe3 plus and NO. Ano yung unang gagawin? Split yung equation into half equations. Pagsamahin ang pare-pareho. Yung Fe parehas yan. So pagsasamahin yan. Ang NO3 at NO parehas may nitrogen. Pagsasamahin natin. Sulat natin yung equation. Fe2 plus Fe3 plus NO3 minus NO. O yun nasa taas, i-balance natin itong Fe2 plus Fe3 plus. Balance na yung atom. May isang Fe, may isang Fe sa product. Ano lang yung problema? Yung charges. Sa reactant side, positive 2 to. Sa product side, positive 3. Saan maglalagay ng electron? Sa mataas ang charge, which is positive 3. Ano yung gagawin natin? Kailangan yung positive 3 maging kaparehas ng nasa positive 2. So, ibig sabihin yan, I have to add 1 electron only. Balance na yan yung atoms, pati yung charge. Okay? So, since nasa product side yung reaction, this is oxidation reaction. Oxidation reaction. O ngayon, dito naman tayo sa baba. NO3 minus 2NO. Balance ba yung nitrogen? Balance. Isang nitrogen, isang nitrogen. Yung oxygen, hindi balance. May 3 ka dito, may 1 ka doon. So, ilang pang oxygen kailangan? 2 pang oxygen. So, 2H2O. Okay, again, pag binabalance yung oxygen, water ang dinadagdag natin. So ilang oxygens na meron lahat? So dito may 3 sa reactant, sa product side may isa, tapos 2 times 1, so dalawa yon, dalawa dito, isa dito, tatlo na rin, balance na yung oxygens. Ano na lang yung kulang? Hydrogens. Dito sa product side, may 4 akong hydrogen. 2 times 2, 4. Sa product side, sa reactant side, wala, no? So I have to add 4H+. Again, H+ ang dinadagdag to balance the hydrogens. Balance na yung atoms natin. 4 na hydrogen, isang nitrogen, 3 oxygens. Ano na lang yung kailangan pa i-balance? Yung electrons, yung charges. Sa reactant side, I have 4 times positive 1 plus 1 times negative 1. So yan ay positive 3. Sa reactant side, 0 yung charges. Wala akong nakikita charges eh. So saan ako maglalagay ng electron? Sa reactant side. Bakit? Kasi sa reactant side, positive 3 yung charge. Dito sa product side, 0. Kailangan pababain ko tong positive 3 papunta sa 0 by adding 3 electrons. No? Since may 3 electrons na, ang charge natin ay magiging 0 na. So balance na yung atoms, balance na yung charges. Then eventually, pagsasamahin natin yan. By the way, since ang electron dito sa baba ay nasa left side, yan ay reduction or may gain ng electron. Finally, pagsasamahin natin yung dalawang equation to get a general equation na, no? Pagsamahin na natin, pero bago pagsamahin, ano yung kailangan? Kailangan parehas yung dami ng electron. Sa baba, may 3 electron. Sa taas, may isa. So, ano gagawin natin para magpantay? I-multiply ko yung taas sa 3 para may 3 electrons na rin siya. Since pantay na yung electrons, pagsasamahin ko na lahat. No? So, 3 electrons, 4H+, NO3 minus, 3Fe2+, 3Fe3+, 3 electrons, NO plus 2H2O. Then, ika-cancel ang similar terms. No? So, ang similar lang natin dito ay yung electron. So, tapos na. So, ang final equation can be written as 4H plus, NO3 minus, 3Fe2 plus. Sa product side, we have 3Fe3 plus, NO, and 2H2O. So, balance na ang ating redox reaction. And dyan, nagtatapos ang topic natin sa redox reactions in aqueous solutions. No? So, after this, pwede na kayo mag-quiz 7 and mag-second prelim exam. No? So, if you have any question, just let me know. No? So, yan. So, if you have concerns then, let me know lang din. Okay? So, salamat and good luck po.